Hey everyone, buckle up because today we're taking a deep dive into the world of commercial driver's licenses in North Dakota. You provided us with some info on the requirements, and let me tell you, there's more to it than meets the eye.
You got that right. It's about way more than just knowing how to drive.
So let's break it down. When we talk about CDLs, what exactly are we talking about?
Essentially, it's a whole system of classifying vehicles. North Dakota has specific categories laid out based on size, weight, what you're hauling, all that.
Okay, so like the classic 18-wheeler.
Exactly. That'd fall under Class A.
Makes sense. So what about something smaller, like a school bus?
That would usually be a Class B. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You might need a CDL, even for vehicles under 26,001 pounds.
Really? Why would that be? I thought the weight was the main factor. It is. But think about those trucks carrying hazardous materials. They might not be huge, but that cargo requires a whole other level of certification. Those placard signs you see. Total giveaway, you're dealing with CDL territory.
Right, you don't want just anyone transporting dangerous stuff. So it's not just about the vehicle either, is it? I've heard your health plays a big part in CDL eligibility.
Absolutely. Driving a big rig, especially for long hauls, it takes a lot out of you. You need to be in top shape, both physically and mentally.
So what kind of health issues could actually disqualify someone?
Well, there are a bunch. Things like heart conditions, severe hearing loss, or problems with your vision. Those can all be real dangerous when you're behind the wheel of something that big.
Yeah, you need all your senses about you, that's for sure.
Exactly. And these regulations, they aren't just about protecting the driver. It's about everyone else on the road, too. Public safety is the name of the game. Take vision, for example. It's more than just seeing 20/20. We're talking depth perception, peripheral vision, being aware of your surroundings, all crucial for maneuvering these massive vehicles.
It's like you need a sixth sense almost, right? Anticipating what's coming at you from all sides.
Precisely. And let's not forget fatigue. Driving those long hours can wear you down, and even a small lapse in concentration can be disastrous. Conditions like sleep apnea, which can make you super drowsy, those are taken very seriously during the medical screening.
So it's an ongoing thing. It's not like you get your medical exam once and you're good to go forever.
Nope, you got to stay on top of your health if you want to keep that CDL.
Yeah.
It's a continuous responsibility.
So you're telling me it's not a one and done deal, huh? Makes you really think about the long haul, so to speak. But once you've got that clean bill of health, that medical certificate, you're good to go, right?
Well, not so fast. That certificate is just the beginning. Depending on what type of driver you are, you might also have to send a copy of it to the North Dakota Driver License Division.
Hold on, there are different types of CDL drivers. I thought a CDL was a CDL.
Oh, there are definitely different categories.
Yeah.
North Dakota outlines 4 of them in their CDL requirements. But only one category actually has to submit their medical certificate.
Okay, now you've got me curious. What's so special about this category 1? Why the extra paperwork?
It all boils down to interstate commerce, really, and those federal regulations.
Yeah.
Category 1 drivers are the ones who are doing both. Interstate A&D, subject to federal regulations. That interstate part is key.
So, like, if you're driving from, say, Fargo all the way down to Texas with a load of goods, that's a no-brainer, right? Interstate travel, got to submit the paperwork.
Exactly. You're crossing state lines, engaging in interstate commerce. But here's where it gets a little tricky. Even if you never leave North Dakota, you could still be considered an interstate driver.
No, wait a minute. How does that work? I thought interstate meant literally driving between states.
It's not just about the route itself, but about the goods being transported. See, there are 3 scenarios that count as interstate travel, and they all depend on where the shipment starts and where it ends up. So even if you're driving within North Dakota, if the goods came from another state or are going to another state, you're part of that interstate commerce.
Okay, I think I'm following you. So let's say I'm picking up furniture that was made in Minnesota and I'm delivering it to a store in Bismarck, still interstate, even though I'm staying within North Dakota.
You got it. Now imagine you're hauling farm equipment from Bismarck to Fargo, all within North Dakota. Sounds pretty interstate, right?
Yeah, seems pretty straightforward.
But what if that equipment was actually manufactured in, say, South Dakota?
Mm-hmm.
You're transporting it within North Dakota, but because it originated outside the state.
You're back in interstate territory. It's like a loophole almost.
Exactly. It's all about the flow of goods. Easy to miss if you don't know the rules. And speaking of rules, let's talk exemptions, because those can really throw people for a loop.
Oh, exemptions. There's always a catch. So who gets to sidestep the CDL requirements entirely?
Well, some are pretty standard. You've got your government employees, federal, state, local. They're usually exempt if they're driving as part of their official duties.
Makes sense. Government vehicles probably have their own set of rules to follow.
Exactly. But it gets interesting with Category 2. That's where things get a little unexpected.
Oh, do tell. Give me the juicy exemptions.
Well, for starters, beekeepers don't need a CDL to transport their beehives.
Wait, beekeepers. Now that's a curveball I didn't see coming.
Right, and it's not just them. Custom harvesters, those guys who go from farm to farm during harvest season, exempt too. And get this, pipeline responders, the folks who handle emergencies and repairs on those pipelines, they're also in the clear.
So no special license needed to drive a beehive mobile or a combine harvester. That's wild.
You know, it really shows you that these regulations, they aren't about being strict for the sake of it. It's about practicality, recognizing that certain jobs have unique circumstances.
Right, it's about common sense. So we've covered a lot about interstate travel, but what about those drivers who mostly stick to North Dakota? They're probably in the clear, right? No need to worry about those interstate rules.
Well, not necessarily. That's where categories 3 and 4 come into play. They're all about intrastate, so within North Dakota. But here's the catch. Even then, you might still need a CDL, depending on the situation.
So even if you think you're just making local runs, you could still be subject to those CDL requirements. That's important for anyone driving bigger vehicles or hauling certain cargo within North Dakota to know. What are some examples where you'd still need that CDL, even for those intrastate trips?
Well, think back to those larger trucks we talked about, the ones over 26,000 pounds. They still need a CDL, even if they're only operating within North Dakota. And of course, those vehicles transporting hazardous materials, the ones that need placards, they also need a CDL, regardless of whether they're crossing state lines or not.
It's like a minefield out there. So
Yeah.
many factors to keep straight. This has been a wild ride trying to figure out all the ins and outs of who needs a CDL in North Dakota.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why it's so important to do your homework. Understand the specific rules that apply to you. Making assumptions can really come back to bite you.
No kidding. Better safe than sorry. That's what I always say. So as we wrap up this deep dive into North Dakota's CDL requirements, what are some key things our listeners should take away from all this?
Don't assume anything. These regulations, they can be tricky, and there's always something new to learn. If you're ever unsure about whether you need a CDL or not, the best thing you can do is reach out to the North Dakota Driver License Division directly.
Go straight to the source.
Exactly. They're the experts. They can give you the most up-to-date and accurate information.
Great advice. Now, we've uncovered a ton of fascinating stuff about CDLs in North Dakota, but it also makes you wonder, right, like with e-commerce blowing up and these supply chains getting more and more complex, what's going to happen to that definition of interstate commerce down the line? How will that affect CDL regulations?
That's a really good question. The lines are getting blurrier all the time. Local versus national, it's not so clear-cut anymore with how goods are moving around. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. It'll be fascinating to see how those regulations adapt. Now, for all you listeners out there, if you've got any stories about dealing with a surprising CDL rule, or maybe you've got a question about your own situation, we want to hear from you. Drop us a comment, share your thoughts. You never know, your story might just inspire our next deep dive. But until then, stay curious and drive safe, everyone.